Merci, bonjour tout le monde. Je commence un petit peu en français pour dire bonjour tout le monde, pour féliciter à l'Université Pierre et Marie Curie et Adoc pour l'organisation de cet événement. Et je suis désolée, mais je vais continuer en anglais parce qu'il y a des mots techniques que je ne suis pas complètement à l'aise en français, mais peut-être ça va venir. I would like to take up where Janet Metcalf with her excellent presentation, the points that she made. We've been working with Vitae over the years, cooperating in several of our activities in doctoral education. And she, in her work, adopts normally the researcher's point of view. I will change from institutional to European to researchers to industry as well, because we in EUA have conducted a couple of major projects funded by the European Commission on doctoral studies or doctoral graduates in collaborative doctoral education, collaborative meaning cooperation between university and businesses. First of all, I will take the institutional/European angle by saying a few words about what is EUA, the association to which I belong, and EUA CDE. What does these things mean? EUA is European University Association and is a grouping of 850 universities over Europe from 46 different countries. We do then represent a large amount of universities, of the university sector, and our work is aimed at gathering good practice from our members to use those good practices, extract main messages, and hence deliver policy messages, mainly to the European Commission, European Parliament, and to all the European partners. The EUA CDE, EUA Council for Doctoral Education, that is a subgroup of universities within EUA. Some are members of EUA, some are not, so membership is very free. Université Pierre et Marie Curie, she's a member of both, she's a very prominent member. But the objective is the same. It's just that it's focusing on doctoral education. So we do have a strong angle on what it is part of the studies. We take the basic principle that doctoral education is about a piece of original research. And we don't care whether it is practice-driven, curiosity-driven, etc. For us, the line that EUA takes is a doctorate and means an academically original piece of research that passes a committee, an academic committee, and deserves the mention of a doctorate. And we place a lot of emphasis in that doctoral education is very individual. So it's very different from any of the previous cycles in the Bologna process. Very different from the first cycle, and very important, very different from the second cycle, mainly the master's education. So we do defend that this is a very individualized project where the person has to develop in research, has to develop his and her skills in research, as then Janet mentioned, all those other important skills and competencies that are relevant for doctoral education. We also take a line on what we call the structure of doctoral education at institutional level. And by structure, we do not mean the adoption of rigid conditions, but we mean the adoption of several boundary conditions to facilitate the process to award a doctoral degree. For example, what is the best process for admission, so that those who engage in doctoral education know where they are getting into. What is the assessment process? How is the supervision process? So we do think that the institutions that more and more take responsibility for their intake of doctoral candidates do have a responsibility, and do they need to put into writing and then create the necessary practice to implement what we call the structure. And I'm saying that this is very important because structure sometimes means rigid, and this is not necessarily what we are aiming. And also some people take a structure as some sort of thematic approach, which is not the case either. It's not about how many courses on transferable skills or things you need in your doctoral education. So it's about the conditions set in the institution. We think that the doctoral education in Europe is one of the hallmarks of Europe, and we think it must be preserved, although it must evolve. So it's a very critical combination of preserving what is good and adapting to the new conditions, and adapting to the new societal demands, including all these movements in open science and open access, etc. We build on the Salzburg principles, as of course Janet also mentioned, and we also take part of all these human resources and mobility steering group structures that the Commission says, precisely reflecting the practice on universities, as you will see very shortly. Yesterday, when we had dinner with Barthélemy and Isabelle, he posed as a question is, what are you going to tell us to why it is worthwhile to do a PhD, a doctorate? I should not say PhD because this is an American term. The proper one for Europe is doctorate, and it's doctoral candidate, not doctoral students. And there is just a few more words about the controversy. We say doctoral education and not doctoral training. This is a very, very controversial expression. We sometimes say doctoral education and training just to be politically neutral and correct. But for us, it's education because a doctoral thesis is aimed at giving the person who is doing the research an academic degree, hence is education. Yet, in some areas, in some countries, they do not see it like that, and they see the doctoral period as a training process. Chacun son goût. So why do a doctorate? Well, a doctorate is about options. Having a doctorate degree gives that person options to do anything they want. I say anything because it opens up a lot of professional possibilities and a lot of research careers that normally those who do not have a doctorate do not have access to. So we all know that labor market is very tough. So one reason is the more education you get, the better prepared you would be to do anything you want. And I think that making a doctorate is a matter of a personal choice because it affects your life. And I think most of you can relate to that. It really affects your personal life as well. So it's a matter of personal choice. It's a matter of being intellectually driven to really analyze very deeply a subject, to educate most of the time yourself with just a little help of your supervisor or supervisors, I should say. But the reality is that you can go anywhere. The only thing you need to be aware is that if you start in a research position after your PhD, doctorate, sorry, you can, whenever you can, or you wish, or you find the opportunity, you can move to non-research positions. You have to be aware that you can do that. Many of us have done it, I include myself, and it's not the end of the world. But moving back, if you move to a non-research position, moving back to a research position, that is a challenge. The more time you spend in a non-research position, if you ever want to go back, you will have a lot of problems. Science, you all know, I'm sure, evolves very rapidly. So more than 1 year, maybe even less in some fields, can be a disaster because you can't then I mean, to reach back the level of the state of the art, it's increasingly difficult. So it is about options, is all very good. You just must be aware of some special things that you should be considered. Now, for a moment, I will do a little parenthesis on that. I will go back to researchers and to researchers' careers or non-careers, sorry, non-research careers. But let me give you a glimpse of policies and structures in universities. We have conducted a study within EUA, within the European University Association, to ask how many universities do have doctoral schools. We think that doctoral school is a good development if properly done, because it really sets up certain structures that are aiming at providing the doctoral candidates the right level of awareness on professional opportunities, on transferable skills, on all sorts of issues that go beyond the purely strict relation supervisor-supervisee, thematically oriented thesis. So these doctoral educations provide a number of services. As you can see in this graph here, many universities, almost 84%, that was back in 2013, have doctoral schools. That is on a sample of 224 European universities. They are established at different levels, that there's a variety. Some are established at program level, faculty level. Sometimes there's one for the whole institutions, providing very horizontal services. Some of them are even institutional, etc. So there is a variety of structures, and that follows the principle of no one size fits all, meaning that each university has to find its own solution, the best thing that works for them. Normally, the policies adopted are on admission, progress monitoring, supervision, and thesis assessment. And you can see that among all these doctoral schools that responded that they have a policy on doctoral education, a vast amount of them have covered the 4 main points of what we call the structured doctoral education, or the structure in policies in universities. Many of them, as you can see here, 90% do offer some sort of training course or awareness course on transferable skills. So Europe is, we can say, not very bad. Also, they provide some career services, less than those that provided the training on or awareness on transferable skills, but still almost 70% do provide some sort of career service. I will now change that last part of my presentation. I will now switch to this special type of doctoral education, if we can say, or at least one of the types of doctoral education, which is the engagement in a process, in a research process that involves both a university, of course, because it's the ultimate responsibility of the doctorate process, and very importantly, a company that is interested in research. That doesn't always happen, but it does happen. I am going to explain here the outcomes of a project that we did with 32 companies, 32 universities, 34 companies, and 23 organizations in the field of higher education, and 13 countries. We, Vitae, for example, was involved, Université Pierre et Marie Curie, IBG as well. They were involved in several parts of the project. Here you have a list. Of course, I won't mention them all, but this will stay for you so you can consult. These are the list of companies and other organizations. So what did we study was, if we can see it in this graph, you can see university business collaborations take many forms and shapes. And you can go from the more traditional one, this contract for a specific, contract times for a specific project, to more advanced forms of collaboration, going to even to organizing special events in primary or secondary school to attract more students, for example, in science, engineering, mathematics, all these disciplines that are experiencing some shortage of candidates. Doctoral programs are somewhat in the middle because this is a very definite way of collaborating with companies. This is a master thesis or doctoral thesis normally are seen by companies who have an interest in research as an entry door to get more convinced of the value of university business collaboration. Why? Because there is a common research ground, there is value on medium to long-term R&D, and there is value on the research outcomes that fit, in a way, the thirst for competitiveness of the companies, not necessarily immediately translated into products, but they give the competitive advantage, the strategic knowledge. And this is when a company normally gets interested in doctoral education. But what I'm saying is this is seen as a very good way of cooperation is because it's delimited on time. Companies know that they have to commit for 3 to 5 times, more or less. This is the time frame. So this, if they agree to that, this is something that they can feel, in a way, at ease because they can plan for that. That's sometimes something that very difficult when you engage with companies is for how long, how much, will I see any specific outcomes. The advantage with the thesis is that there are some outcomes because at the end of the process, after 3 to 5 years, you need to have that person placed in front of a academic committee, and that person needs to get a degree. There is a clear objective, and the company can see the value of how they can see that there is a process, they can plan when to contribute, and they can plan how to contribute. So that is a planning a doctoral thesis like that. The planning phase is very important because everybody has to live up to expectations, but also everybody has to know who is doing what and for what. So, as I'm saying, trust and planning is a very important phase of this type of process, not only in terms of contribution, but also in terms of intellectual property rights, of course. Now, this is something that very often is put right up the front of a collaboration, yet those who have been able to go through find it not as a problem, but a part of the solution. And this is very good when it really works. For example, here we have a university that is very important. All the important aspects of the collaboration have to be discussed before the project. That is what a university said. I will insert some quotes in my main messages. There is the issue of co-supervision, what we call supervision. As also Janet mentioned, the supervision is essential in doctoral education, that sort of guidance without being too intrusive in the conduct of the research. Things can get more complicated when there is a company involved. And there are very creative solutions. Well, Isabel will talk you later about supervision, but I will talk a little bit about this co-supervision in doctoral education. Normally, you have the academic leader or academics, that is the normal, and this is the person that is ultimately responsible for the academic quality of the thesis, so no question about who is driving the process. But then the industry, they select or they say how they want to be involved. We have seen cases from industry companies who want a report every 3 months, every 6 months, every year. We have seen companies, even French companies, who don't want to have a co-supervision. Yet they supervise, but independently, just because they do respect the academic part of the thesis, and they don't want to mix both views. So they want the candidate to see the pure industrial part, and so it's up to the candidate to figure out how to insert it into the more academic part. So there is, as I said, that's part of the planning. That is very important that this agreement gets set before the thesis starts. But also, it's very important that as the process is launched, there is regular interaction between the academic and the industry supervisor. One main component of, or one common component in this type of doctoral thesis is the interdisciplinarity. That is also one of the titles of your workshop today. But companies find their competitive advantage normally at the boundaries of knowledge, because this is when they can then can trap a special knowledge and generate a product or a service out of it. So they place an enormous value on interdisciplinary. They normally are not interested in any research that doesn't involve any interdisciplinary. Now, this is very difficult sometimes for researchers because we want our papers to be published, and I'm sure that many of you know that if you don't follow kind of the mainstream research, you may have problems in getting your papers accepted. So again, another important thing to take into account when planning a project like that. We have to say as well that this type of projects then create a lot of, I don't know, but they create more opportunities for a person to move back and forth the academic world and the industrial world, because they hold the knowledge that can be useful for those. So if they can afford it, and we can discuss that later on with the question session, if they can afford it, that is the pathway towards an interdisciplinary career and also an intersectoral career. The European Commission is currently developing some schemes to favor that intersectoral career, because it's very successful when you can create such a profile. These people are certainly not unemployed. For example, here we have some quotes from universities or from companies or from doctoral candidates. You see, companies see that they get to know industrial solutions, because you may know that this is one of the main criticisms of doctorates, that they are not really aware of what is out there. Yet they think that by being exposed to the company, they can really get a first experience of what is happening there. Doctoral candidates, here is one that says every day is training, going to the office, talking to colleagues, meeting customers or production personnel. You can see also the value of it placed by the doctoral candidates. There is at the level of, when you look at that from, then I am going back to a more overarching level. When you look that to the what happens in a region, because we studied 5 main regions in Europe and what the interactions of the universities were with the regional actors and particularly with the regional authorities, you can see that this doesn't happen just like that. You need a full ecosystem of conditions, including this, what we call the regional dimension. What does it mean? It means that the region is committed to high added value products and services. Hence, they value the doctorates. Hence, there are a series of policies in place to really make that happen. And there is not only support at the university level, but there is support at the industrial tissue to really host some of these doctorates. Now, that is not exempt of problems, of course, but it happens. There is also a policy dimension. In addition to these regional, that can happen at regional level, national level, that depends on how you define the region. The region can be cross-border, can be very inbreeding in a country, or can be just a group of countries. But the policy dimension is very important, not only in terms of individual support to the universities or to the companies. It is very important because you need policy support for all those conditions that do not depend on the university and the company on its own. For example, large infrastructure, spaces to promote the exchange of ideas between companies and between universities. You need proper frameworks for researchers' careers or for doctorates' careers. It doesn't matter if they are specifically on research positions or not. We saw before that there is a full breadth of options for doctoral candidates. So I will now close this part and say, okay, what do we do, EUA, European University Association, with all this work? We take it up to the university. We, for example, to the commission, and for example, back in 2012, we developed what we called a memorandum of understanding with the commission, to which we committed to tell the commission what were the universities doing. Because we have 850 members, we can have an access to a large amount of universities and to a large amount of information drawing on their policies. And this amount of information is the one that allows us to create the policy positions to contribute to large European initiatives such as the Charter and Code that was mentioned before, or the innovative doctoral training programs that also were developed by the Commission. In particular, this project that I've been describing to you was used for the design of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie industrial doctorates, for example. And of course, this knowledge also, as I said before, allows us to be part of all these expert groups in the Commission where we can bring this experience on behalf of the universities. My final remarks then are kind of two words. One is accountability in terms of institutional responsibility, institutional accountability. We can see development in Europe where universities are taking the responsibility for their doctoral graduates as never before. And we think that this is very good. This accompagnement, I think we all think is very important. There is a risk of over-assessment, as I said, because we all know that researchers, we are assessed when we start, we are assessed in the middle, we are assessed in the end, we are assessed after 5 years if we get a position in a university, or after 1 year if you get a position in a company. There is a constant assessment, and even in the doctoral education, during the doctoral process, when you nowadays have to learn how to be a good researcher, how to have your transferable skills in place, how to present yourself, you have to have international experience, you have to know several languages, so it can become very complicated. So that's why I summarized of this risk of over-assessment, of which we all need to be aware. And as you can see by the results that I showed to you, there are many internal procedures already in place, which means that this is taking good shape. I'm not saying that these are the best procedures, but okay, that's the procedures. They can be reassessed and changed if considered appropriate. My second word is enhancement. Universities are clearly enhancing their processes, and they are in the process of developing this, what we call integrated quality culture, meaning that the doctoral education, as Janet said before, is moving from this individual relationship, supervisor-supervisee, to a more complete surrounding. Yet this relationship remains essential, but there is many more things around. And this is what we call the integrated quality culture service. As you could see also previously in my presentation, the careers advice services are provided in doctoral education. And we have now a huge breadth of case studies that do show how to make things work. So we think that this really is set for very good examples. We are not lacking good practice examples anymore as we did, for example, 5 or 6 years ago. So I think this is all very good. Let me finish by promoting the annual conference of the European University Association that next year will be in Antwerp, in Belgium, and it will be on research and innovation, on European universities in research and innovation. We will structure the program in 3 main parts: people, policies, and partnerships, because we think that these are three components very important of research today. And through these three dimensions, we plan to address the complexities of the partnerships, the importance of the policy frameworks, and above all, the importance of the education of the people, of the youngs. A special feature of this conference, and that's why I put it here up on the screen. For the first time, we are inviting researchers to provide posters. We will have a session on posters. There will be a series of 10 posters. One of the authors will provide a 3-minute speech presenting their posters, and then participants will be able to walk around for 1 hour during the coffee break to establish dialogue with the researchers, etc. The key question here is to show how university research can have an impact in society. And this will be the main criteria to select those posters. So I invite you here, if you think you have a very good piece of research that has had an impact in society, you are welcome to present your application. You can go back 10 years. So if your scientific discovery or concept was generated 10 years back, but has an application today or has found an application during these last 10 years, you can present your application. And we hope to get at least 10 posters. And the idea is that these posters, and maybe more if we think that they are all meeting these criteria, we will open a library of contributions of university research in society, because I think that linking all this work to the society dimension, as it has Janet and some people who ask questions asked, we need the society. We need the society to back up the activity of universities. This is all very important. Universities clearly have to change. There are many signals around us that are telling us that universities have to change. Okay, maybe we don't need to change, but certainly we need to evolve. So we need to adapt. There is an enormous amount of challenges ahead of us. And we need the backup of the society. We can't lose society. They are the glue that we need to preserve the university life. And with this, I will end my talk. And I will be happy to respond to questions.